This week we're going to be reading one of the most full of mitzvot Parshiot. The weekly Torah reading has a lot of different commandments on all kinds of topics. Parshat Mishpatim. I mentioned on a different video at some point that this is the only Parsha, the only weekly reading, about which the division of our Parshiyot was different in different communities, meaning in the really old times there were all kinds of ways to divide the entire 5 books of Moshe into various readings. For instance, the Talmud mentions certain customs in the land of Israel to read the Torah not in 1 year but in 3 years. Apparently there were different minhagim to read in 3 or 3.5 years the Torah. Of course, then each parsha is much smaller, each Sidra. But those customs went away a really long time ago. At least in the last 1,500 years, all the Jewish people from one end of the world to the other read the Torah exactly the same way. You could travel from England to Yemen and still be reading the exact same parsha. The only exclusion is our parsha, Mishpatim. There were certain places in Spain and in North Africa where they used to split it into 2. From the verse in Kesef Talviat Ami, that was a separate parsha. I mentioned all this in a different video. I'm not going to go into the various proofs that are offered. There's no question about it that this was a separate parsha. And this minhag apparently was sort of kept until recently in Tunisia, as far as I understand. At least in some places in North Africa, it wasn't a totally forgotten minhag. The ancient Sephardi minhag to split this into 2 weekly readings. It's not a big surprise because this parsha is incredibly, not so long in terms of words necessarily, it's not the longest parsha, but in terms of concepts, in terms of what to discuss, when the Rebbe has to give lectures, there's so many topics here, so many different laws in just one parsha. In fact, there is a midrash that discusses that there are 3 most loaded with mitzvot parshiot. In the entire Torah, there are 3 parshiot that have more mitzvot than any others. And that is one in the book of Shemot, one in the book of Vayikra, and one in the book of Dvarim. It makes a lot of sense because the book of Bamidbar, the 4th book, what usually non-Jews call it Numbers. By the way, our sages also sometimes called it the census, would be more correct translation. Chumash HaPikudim. Pikudim is the counting of the population, the census. So that's where the book of Numbers comes from, the name, a different name for that book. So the book of Numbers doesn't have a lot of mitzvot. Did you notice it? Of course, Bereshit doesn't have a lot of mitzvot. But the book of Numbers also, it's mostly stories, not so many mitzvot. There are only 3 books that are loaded with mitzvot. Shemot, Vayikra, and Dvarim. 2nd, 3rd, and the 5th books. So each of them has one parsha which is extremely loaded with mitzvot. There's so many mitzvot in each of these parshiot. And that is our parsha Mishpatim in the book of Shemot, Parshat Kedoshim in the book of Vayikra, and Parshat Kiteitzeh in the book of Dvarim. That's according to our sages. Those are the 3 most loaded with mitzvot parshiot. So like I said, the topics in this parsha are multiple on all kinds of different, not necessarily related subjects, but at least a very large portion, maybe more than half of the mitzvot, have to do with specifically mishpatim. How do you translate the word mishpatim? The Torah is very careful about exactly how to call different kinds of mitzvot. There are words like mishpatim, torot, mitzvot, chukim. All of these are different words that imply different kinds of mitzvot. Mishpatim is generally what the Torah refers to as, of course, mishpat is judgment. So it's the type of mitzvot that today we would call choshen mishpat type of mitzvot. We, of course, are accustomed to Shulchan Aruch, the division of all the mitzvot into 4 sections. And the last section, called choshen mishpat, is where all the laws between people are discussed mostly. All kinds of business laws, damages, kinds of inheritances, kinds of disputes, monetary disputes, lending, borrowing, All of that is in the section of Chosh and Mishpat. The main source in the Mishnah and the Talmud for these is what's called Nezikin, Sidra Nezikin, and the first tractate of what used to be called Nezikin, they divided it into three: Bava Kama, Bava Metzia, Bava Batra. In fact, in the cycle of Daf Yomi, the cycle that a lot of Jews follow, and that is to learn one page of Talmud a day. The cycle takes over 7 years to finish the entire Talmud, Babylonian Talmud. So in the cycle of Daf Yomi, right now we're learning closer to the end of Bava Kama, the first of the three Bavat. Baba is gate. So there is Seder Nezikin, the entire one of the 6 Sidra in Mishnah, the entire order is called Nezikin, damages. And the first tractate used to be called Nezikin. And it had 30 chapters. And in order not to have such a huge tractate, it split it into 3. Bava Kama, Bava Metzia, Bava Batra. The first gate, the middle gate, and the last gate. And right now we're closer to the end of the first gate. So we're learning in Daf Yomi cycle the various laws of damages that one has to pay for. The middle gate is more about borrowing and returning the lost items and things like that. And the last gate is mostly laws of acquisition and writing the business papers and inheritances and that type of those types of laws. So the source for a lot of these laws, especially in Bava Kama, is actually our Parshat Mishpatim. Almost everything that's done in Bava Kama and a large part of Bava Metzia is all taken from our Parsha. Of course, our Parsha is just Roshei Prakim. It's like the titles of the articles. It's very short and almost in a kind of verse form. Right? It's not really rhythmic. There's no rhymes in the Torah in most cases, but it's almost rhythmic. It's definitely not prose. It's poetry of sorts. So these laws are short, just the hints to the main laws. But of course, the Talmud discusses all the details. And in general, the Torah does not separate what Americans would call church and state, meaning the financial laws are also part of the laws of the Torah. And the judges, the Dayanim, have to know, of course, the laws of the Torah and the Talmud in order to judge. There is no separate law for secular things. So the person studying Bava Kama, mostly discussing how to pay for damages or the kinds of things that maybe a thief might say or might think. So one might wonder, how is that learning the Torah? Thinking like a thief, understanding the logic of a thief, or what kind of deceitful words he might say or not say. So in this, of course, a lot of the sages, including Rabbi Chaim MiVolozhin and the Hasidic sages also, like Baal Hatanya, the first Chabar Rebbe, they all discuss that learning the will of Hashem, in a certain sense, is like approaching Hashem. It doesn't matter that it's all in kind of covered with many, many layers and, of course, projected to our world. The revealed word of Hashem is the Torah, and the various laws, the specific physical laws that have to do, include also the laws of thieves and deceitful people. You have to know that too. That's also part of the Torah. Everything is part of the Torah that's revealed in the Torah, and including the oral Torah, the Talmud. So at any rate, the Parshat Mishpatim, at least a large portion of it, most of it probably in the first half, deals primarily with the laws between people and with various types of financial laws and other laws between people. Not everything is financial, of course. For instance, the possible prohibition against listening to Lashon Hara may be hinted in our Parsha. Lo tisa shem ashav. Right? In a different place, the Torah says in Parshat Kiddushim, not to be a gossiper among your people, not to walk. Lo tilech rachil be'amecha. Don't walk as a gossiper among your people. Don't say bad things about others. But in this Parsha, it says, don't listen, basically. Don't accept the false report or basically the bad things that are said. Don't listen to people who talk about others badly. Don't listen to gossipers. That's how our sages interpret this mitzvah. So a lot of the laws between people, including financial and non-financial laws, are in this parsha, but not only. This parsha includes, it's introductory parsha to the Jewish people accepting the Torah and becoming Yehudim, becoming Jews. In a certain sense, it's Judaism that's revealed in short form. It's in a very similar way that they used to accept converts. Today, of course, the process of conversion takes a while, usually a few years. But it used to be, it was somewhat simpler, and they couldn't, of course, tell the convert all the laws with all the details, so they would give them a sample. So in a sense, this parsha is a sample of different laws. So it includes some laws of Shabbat, some laws of Shemitah, which is the 7th year when the whole land rests, sabbatical year. It includes the holidays. It includes a lot of financial laws, as I mentioned. And it includes some kashrut laws, very few, just most of kashrut laws will be in the Sefer Vayikra. And will be repeated in Sefer Dvarim, a lot of them. But some laws, for instance, treifa, one shouldn't eat an animal that was literally treifa may mean an animal that's ripped by a predator, but it includes, according to our sages, an animal that is has a wound that can cause it to die pretty soon, within a year. Certain types of ruptures and other kinds of wounds that are included in the treifot. This is a very complex, of course, set of laws that's mostly discussed in the Talmud and Tractate Chulin. So all of these laws, the Rosh Prakim, kind of the short hints to the major laws of the Torah on all kinds of topics. The question is, when were they actually revealed? Many sages, including Ramban, follow this idea that generally the Torah is chronological. We shouldn't assume the Torah is not chronological unless it says that explicitly. So therefore, what did the Torah say until now? The Torah said, of course, the 10 Dvarim. I mentioned already, I don't want to use the commonly found term in today's English language, and that is the 10 Commandments, because it's not really 10 Commandments. There's more than 10 there, and our sages never call it 10 Commandments. But the Torah calls it Aseret HaDvarim, 10 sayings. So after the Aseret HaDvarim, the Torah mentions a few other laws. And we read them in the last week's Parsha in Yitro. And now it continues with many, many, many different other laws. So it could be that they were all revealed on the same day, almost immediately after the 10 sayings. Moshe was told to tell the Jewish people a number of other laws. And maybe the Sefer Abrit that's mentioned further in the end of this Parsha is in fact a book of covenant that included those laws. So a sample of different laws of Torah written in concise manner, just the Rosh Prakim. All of that was written in a book, in a manuscript, on cloth, probably. And the covenant was made between the Jewish people and Hashem, and then Moshe went to Har Sinai and received the rest of the laws. That's one possibility. So that's according to Ramban, and that follows the chronological order of Torah. On the other hand, there are some who say that at least part of this parsha was said when Moshe was already at Har Sinai, when he ascended for the 40 days to the Mount of Sinai. Or maybe there are parts of this parsha that were said in the first 40 days and part in the last 40 days. This is another possibility that some commentators offer. In fact, if you read carefully in the last week's parsha, it did mention that Moshe entered what's called Arafel, meaning darkness. So he entered somewhere that would seem to be the Har Sinai. So maybe it is talking about that particular time period, that right after the 10 sayings, the Aseret HaDvarim, Moshe ascended, and everything else in the Parshat Yitro and Parshat Mishpatim was said then. Among others, the Vilna Gaon brings this as a possibility. In general, the end of this Parsha, the end of Parshat Mishpatim, there are those who say that it happened even before the Har Sinai. Again, this is following the opinion that Torah is not always in chronological order, not like the opinion of Ramban. Some of our sages believe that Torah can be interpreted as different parshiot. Could be that they happened before or after, and we don't know when what happened. Torah is not in chronological order, period. As I said, Ramban thinks that Torah is usually in chronological order, unless it says the opposite. But there are sages who say that no. It could be that in some places the Torah just doesn't follow chronological order for whatever reason. So therefore, part of the end of this week's Parsha, part of Parshat Mishpatim at the end, could have been actually something that happened a long time ago already, before even the Sinaitic revelation, before the 10 Dvarim, the 10 sayings. So Rashi, for instance, brings this as a possibility that some of the verses at the end of this parsha actually happened before the Aseret Dvarim. And on this I'll end for today. If you like this video, please press like and please subscribe to our channel.